Cornish Saints and Sinners by J. Henry Harris. Chapter 22. A Cornish van is a miracle on wheels, but we're told that the real genuine article, like Penaluna's, which still covers its 5 miles in 1 hour and a quarter, is getting rarer and more rare. Penzance and Houston, Truro and Redruth, and most of the market towns are visited on market days by newly painted antiquities on wheels. They line up a street or a square for a few hours and then disappear again until the next market day. The better class machine is a Royal Mail or a Standard, a Comet, or some such swagger thing. But Penaluna's van has a first-grade certificate in the miracle line. Rail and motor cars have thinned out this ancient sort of vehicle pretty considerably. Mrs. Penaluna runs a refreshment house 6 miles from a market town, and Mr. Penaluna is the carrier by descent. For 3 generations the Penalunas carried whatever there was to carry. And it seems that when one machine wore out, another was built after the same pattern, and then another, and another, so that Penaluna's van is now pretty much the same as its predecessors, and the type has been preserved in spite of steam and petrol. Mr. Penaluna's van went to the market town twice a week, and Mr. Penaluna's motto was to look after his parcels and let passengers take care of themselves. Our traps were amongst the rest of the bales and boxes and parcels stowed away according to the carrier's idea of the fitness of things. We looked inside and said we'd walk to the town later in the day. We didn't see much accommodation for passengers. We were mistaken. One woman after another got into the van with baskets of dairy produce and things and settled themselves somehow. The van was canvas covered and its sides bulged, so we thought it must be full. We didn't understand. People came along with more baskets and got in, so Guy said they must be sticking to the roof, feet upwards like flies. Every moment we expected to see the van come apart and let its contents into the road. But it didn't, and held together by force of habit, we supposed. Time was up, and we thought the good Mr. Penaluna would start, but he was in no hurry. There was a regular customer to come, and she always came last. Somebody did come, a crowning glory of 20 stun, with a girl by her side carrying things. The regular waddled up and said it was warmish, and hands were spread out to take in things and help the lady when she was ready. And Mr. Penaluna was behind to give a helpful push. The lady, with liberal breadth of beam and no featherweight, disappeared inch by inch, and we stood by expecting to hear shrieks from the inside victims. Only nothing of the sort happened, and Mr. Penaluna closed the door with a bang, and the proud air of a railway porter and a living purgatory on wheels waltzed away. Mr. Penaluna got up on a swinging knife-board and cracked his whip in a professional way about the ears of the wiry pair of horses in front. Guy asked Mrs. Penaluna whether she thought that the women inside would come out alive, which seemed to amuse her. She said Penaluna might hap to pick up 1 or 2 more on the road. "There's always room for 1 more in Penaluna's van," said she, with a grand sweep of the arm, indicating that a good slice of creation might be carried to market twice a week. And no mistake about it. The Bookworm was under a promise not to go past the first milestone, but to sit on it and wait until we overtook him. Guy said we needn't hurry, as he saw him sneak a book into his pocket, and he wouldn't know how the time passed until the sun went down. "If the little beggar can lose himself, he will," said Guy, jumping on the hedge and looking round. Then he shouted, "Cooey!" And an answer came a few yards off, where the bookworm was sitting on a heap of stones, chatting to a man with his sleeves turned up, and who was the parish stonebreaker. This Mr. Stonebreaker worked in a disused quarry, wherein he was sheltered from all winds and had for company a sleek-looking donkey, which he rode to and fro morning and evening. The bookworm struck the place just about luncheon time. The man had taken off his wire goggles, pulled out his pasty, and the donkey's head rested on his shoulder, waiting for the two ends of the pasty to be put into its mouth. Mr. Stonebreaker rolled up his jacket for the bookworm to sit on, and offered him a bit of pasty, and when we joined the party of three, they made a very pretty picture. The man was a droll fellow, and set the bookworm laughing, and the animal joined in its very best style. The bookworm rose and shook hands with his newly found friend, wasting the poor devil's time, and never tipped him, I'll bet, said Guy with an air of disgust. I couldn't, replied the bookworm, the idea that Guy thought him mean creeping over him. The man treated me as an equal and played the host, and how could I tip him? You have sold the good name of every tourist for evermore, said Guy hastily, and before we knew what he was up to, he bolted back to the old quarry. Catch, shouted he, spinning a coin towards the man. Thank ye kindly, but what be yon for? Then Guy made a speech, and the man laughed, and returned the coin without any sign of displeasure. I'll be hanged if a coin ever came back to me in this way before. I shall keep it for luck, said Guy. If ye bain't in a hurry, I'll tell ye a story, said the man, as leisurely as though he were lord of the manor. I shall be taking up your valuable time, said Guy. Never mind me, we can afford it, can't us, Alden? Stroking the donkey's head. Us can always find time when we do work by the day. Then he began. You don't know our person, s'pose? Well then, 'tis 'bout he, but the one avore, who had a purty field of corn one year. Sure enough, and he hired Jim Treddinick to come over and ration. Now, Pusson was writing a sermon, and could hear Jim's drashel going one, do, dray, like a church bell tolling for burying. This will never do, saith Pusson to hisself, and down he goes to the barn, and Jim was there, making believe to sweat a leak, and the old drashel was going one, two, three, like the church bell. The man'll eat up the valley of corn in the drashing of it, said Pusson as he went back to his room. Now, whether Pusson falled asleep, or dreamed with his eyes wide open, or whether it was real, I dunno. But the Piskie that used to belong to the place stood afore him, with his drash dolls over his shoulder. Now Pusson wasn't proud, and telled him about Jim Treddinick, how he was hired by the day and his meat to drash the corn in the barn, and I shall be ate out of house and home, said Pusson. He is that slow. Then the little man laughed, and took the drashels off his shoulders, and began to beat on the floor, stroke by stroke, with Jim Treddinick in the barn, and he made a tune of it, like this. By the day, by the day, by the day, 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 by the day, by the day, by the day, day, day. 'Twas slow music, sure, but 'twas what Jim Treddinick was making in the barn. Then the little man changed it and worked his drashels lively, and the tune he made was like this. By the job, by the job, by the job, 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 by the job, by the job, by the job, as quick as you plaze. Then Pusson rubbed his eyes, and went over to the barn and made a fresh bargain with Jim Treddinick, and his corn was all drashed that very night. Well, said Guy, interrogatively, if I had been breaking these stones by the job, you wouldn't have heard this story, said the man, with a humorous twist of his mouth. You're a genius, said Guy, shying a shilling at him, and running away at top speed. The fellow is a millionaire, said Guy, overtaking us. I shall never be able to say I haven't met a rich man. I had to shy the coin at him, and I don't know now if he'll trouble to pick it up. He's a gentleman, and his donkey knows it, said the Bookworm, and it was his last word on the subject. Chapter 23. 3 occupations have followed: farming, mining, and fishing. But the Cornish are a handy race, and it is not an uncommon thing for a man to cultivate a farm, work in a mine, and fish in the sea. A wheelbarrow farm is a small holding which a man may get along with the assistance of a wheelbarrow, and is common enough in the mining districts. When a mine is near the sea, the wheelbarrow farmer has a boat and puts in time fishing when not underground. There are no factories, as understood elsewhere, and if you see smoke afar off, it's just some farmer burning weeds or a railway engine puffing along. There's never smoke enough in any one place to soil a butterfly's wing, and some medical men have already made note of the fact. In the mining district, people talk tin and copper and dream about little else, though it's tin for choice. Redruth is the reputed headquarters of the tin worship. When we reached the town, everybody seemed to be in the street, talking at once. We thought some great calamity had happened, but found out that it was only the usual when men came in from Camborne and round about. There is an inner temple called an exchange, but most of the exchanging seems to be done in the street. Men talk together, and then out come little notebooks. It looks like street betting, but the policeman takes no notice, so of course it's something else. Millions sterling have changed hands in this way, and in this street. But we were told that times were dull now. People were lively enough, and whether they win or lose, they go on talking and dreaming of tin. It has been a wonderful land, this. And the stories told of fortunes made in tin and copper give fairy tales a back seat. But then, for every fortune made, a fortune is lost. And the way to get 10 shillings worth of tin is to melt 20 shillings worth of gold, we were told. Of course, there's the other side, but we haven't time to go into it. It was too much like fiscal politics. The people about here are prosperous to look at, but we were told that they were ruined regularly once a week or fortnight, as the case may be. Strangers may make mistakes when they see ruined people for the first time, but they get to know that when a tin man looks most prosperous, he's most ruined. A copper man may be afflicted in the same way, but tin was uppermost when we were in the place. The great men in these parts are captains, mine captains. A Newmarket horse trainer and jockey combined is not more looked up to on the heath than a mine captain here. He is the man who knows and can put a friend onto a good thing. People always think a mine captain has a good thing up his sleeve, and you must be civil to him to make him shake it out. They are modest men, however, and live in small houses to check any tendency to pride, and on Sunday Captain Jack and Captain Jose and the best samples go preaching. The kingdom of heaven is very much like a mine to a miner, and if she cuts rich, he wants to be there. A mine is she, and has many wooers when rich or reputed to have great expectations. Mines in these parts are also feminine in the coquettish way in which they show just sufficient of their attractions at one time to lure men on, and then nothing. The caprices of a season's beauty are not greater than those of a mine, nor is the condition of a Derby favourite more closely watched and canvassed. A mine may look well or be in a bad way, and all the men crowd around wheel this and wheel that, as though her breath were perfumed, and then turn their backs upon her when old age and wrinkles come, and her eyes are picked out, and she's neglected and left to grow dropsical and pass from memory. Sometimes a pet wheel overruns the constable and ruins all her lovers, and then no secret is made of her wicked little ways. But no professional beauty is more run after and talked about when she's in her prime. Guy was relieved to find that the Gulf Stream was not held responsible for tin. We had heard so much of the Gulf Stream, how it made the taties grow, and the flowers bloom, and the air warm, and the wind cool, and the skies blue, and the rain wet. But no one here said it had anything to do with the making of tin. You may stream for tin, but that is only one way of getting it. And the Gulf Stream doesn't come in, and there are tin crystals in streams, but this is a detail known mostly to natives. Miners call themselves Cousin Jacks, and a Cornish miner in any part of the universe answers to Cousin Jack. The Bookworm tried to find the origin of the name from a man tending the engine at a mine, who replied, "S'pose Adam gave it out when he named t'other animals." This was a good beginning. The men change their clothes in the engine room. They call it shifting, and a shift is worth the trouble, for a miner coming up from the bowels of the earth with a bit of tallow candle in his cap looks a clay gnome of bad character. And gentle manners only increase prejudice, for why should such a forbidding-looking animal be gentle? He was not in the least surprised to see us, but when he had shifted, we were surprised to see him. He was no longer gnome, but man, and good at that. Was there anything we would like to see or hear about? He was entirely at our disposal. He showed us crystals of pure tin, colourless and flashing like diamonds. He supposed that tin might be manufactured the same as diamonds, but wasn't sure, and thought that nature must have taken a lot of trouble when making tin. Would not be surprised if the pressure of the two seas had much to do with it. It was very singular that Cornwall was the richest spot in the universe in tin stone. There was plenty of tin elsewhere, but not Cornish tin. Oh dear no. Tin was known in the days of Moses, and where could it have come from but here? As a commercial commodity, tin certainly first came from Cornwall, and so, first of all, brought Britain under the influence of the older civilizations. Caesar no more discovered Britain than Columbus America, and Cornish miners were gentlemen in manners and hospitable in the days of Diodorus Siculus, who attributed their advance in civilization to their frequent intercourse with Greeks and Phoenicians. It was on record that a Phoenician merchant, finding that he was followed, ran his ship ashore rather than let another into the secret of getting tin. Mr. Chamberlain could have done no better, could he? Mining was a science now, more or less exact and very exacting. We were in the centre of a great school of mines, and students came here from all parts to learn their business and get diplomas. He told us something of superstitions common to miners. Science explains everything, of course, but can't get rid of old beliefs in a hurry. A mine's reputation was sometimes her weak point, just like a fine lady's, and when it was blown open, then good day and goodbye. Get a chat, when you can, with an underground mine captain. South Africa is a sort of outlying farm for the mining division, and when things are brisk, every mail brings 20 or 30,000 pounds sterling for wives and families and the old folks at home. Every market night is an object lesson in political economy. When the Boer War was on, most of the shops were in mourning, and people went about with hunger in their eyes. Cousin Jack goes abroad to make money, and what he saves he sends home. On his return, his delight is to get a wheelbarrow farm and come into Redruth Market and talk tin. Cousin Jack likes to come home to die and be buried. He's like a Chinaman in his love for native dust. Some Cornishmen live where they are born, but as a rule they drift to all quarters of the world and look longingly homewards, like the Jew towards Jerusalem. The most conservative of all men is the fisher, whose little all can be put on board his boat and who is seldom far from the smoke of his own chimney. The miners are restless and always ready to strike their tent and march. Only wherever they go overseas, their children are Cornish. The Saints and Piskies, the Nuggies and Buckers are all drummed into them. And there's no sun so bright, no sea so blue, no air so soft in all the world as in the dear old county which they belong to and shall see one day. There spring up melodies in the little hearts over the seas, until they are Cornish in every beat and throb. A youngster was posting a letter in Sydney, New South Wales, and a friend of the family asked, "Where's the letter going, sonny?" "Home." "Where's home?" "Why, Cornwall, to be sure." Outside of itself, the county has a large population containing a goodly percentage of the salt of the earth. Redruth is under the shadow of Carn Bray, the home of Paleolithic man. The castle doesn't count for much now the Druids have been played out. The Bookworm told us that enough rubbish had been written about the Druids to build a respectable beacon fire, and what was worth preserving would go in a watch pocket. However, there is Carn Bray, and those who wish to see the Druids' altar may without let or hindrance. The Carn looks over the mines, and you may see the sea on the north and the sea on the south winking like two eyes of heavenly blue. The guidebooks recommend a clear day for preference. It is said that underneath this bare and poverty-looking ridge of rocks there is mineral wealth enough to buy up King Solomon's mines. It's nice to know that the riches of the world are under one's feet, and all poor people on the tramp who like the sensation can have it here free of charge. In fact, there is no charge for anything. You may drink at the holy wells, visit the churches, see the antiquities, go down the mines, walk through museums, and do everything with a smile and a civil tongue. No charge. Tip as you please. A cheerful giver has his reward. It was somewhere under the shadow of Carn Bray that Baron Munchausen was born, in the lively brain of one Rudolf Erich Rasp, a fugitive Hanoverian, at one time assaymaster and storekeeper at Dole Cove Mine. Herr Rasp, professor of archaeology and curator of the museum at Castle, and member of the Royal Society, England, appropriated some precious metals under his charge, and skipped. He hadn't learnt the 10th commandment properly and forgot the 8th. People in places of trust are better educated now, but this was 150 years ago. The Bookworm told us that Baron Munchausen was a real man, and Herr Rasp wrote his wonderful adventures. No one knows the house in which Herr Rasp lived, but the Bookworm insisted on looking at every cottage and barn with a touch of antiquity upon it, within a radius of 3 miles from Dole Cove. He liked to do it and was satisfied. The invention of coal gas as an illuminant took place at Redruth, and a tablet commemorating the discovery is actually placed outside the house in which William Murdoch, the inventor, lived. Murdoch was not a Cornishman, hence the tablet. Bookworm touched the walls of the house, the door handle and the knocker, but we didn't see that anything special came of it. Camborne is also the mining division and has wider streets and fewer shops than Redruth. But then it has gone in for brains, and young men wishful to learn mining come here now and go through a course of lectures in classrooms and go underground and work. The Oxford of mining students is Camborne. Only the students live where they like and have latch keys. Joshua Crystal was born here. So also was Richard Trevithick, the first to apply steam to locomotives. We did not see any public monument to either. The people in this division are Weslems, and great on chapels, but fall from grace when there is a political election. It is sad, but politics stir up the old Adam worse than a drop in the price of tin. Candidates for parliamentary honours are only accepted by insurance offices at extra risk premiums. Guy intends going in for Parliament one day and studied the matter on the spot. He thinks he knows a softer place. A good deal of woman labour is employed in mines. They are the bow maidens and work on the dressing floors. Work agrees with them, and Professor Sandow wouldn't find much room for developing the muscles of a bow maiden. We saw some at work from the train and heard them singing. We saw others nearer, and they were singing also. It's just part of the business to sing, and more hymns are sung over Cornish tin than over all the rest of the minerals raised in the world. One girl starts singing, and the rest join in, and very sweet singing it is when heard in the open. The surface men catch on, and there's just sweet harmony whilst the stamps are dancing, and the great bob is going up and down, pumping out water. Nothing stops when the orchestra is in full swing. The men generally sing too, when going and coming, and they like a hymn with a good, rousing march tune. After the night and early morning shifts, the hills and valleys are tuneful, and people hearing know what hour it is, as the shifts are regular. There are 4 shifts in the 24 hours. A shift is called a corps. Chapter 24. The man in soft felt hat and brown canvas bag slung across his side, with wicked-looking little hammerhead peeping out, is a common object. Specimens enough have been taken out of the county to metal a turnpike road, and yet the scientific stone man comes and tumbles over the refuse heaps once again and chips little bits in his own account and carries them off. To find sermons in stones is his reward, and there are sermons enough, in all conscience, in a county which is mostly stone or something harder. When a man of science in a soft felt hat is missing, the first idea is that he's fallen down an old mine shaft, and that his stone treasures have taken him safely to the bottom, 100 fathoms or so under water. It is well to beware of one's steps, and not to take short cuts in the dark across moors and downs, which are honeycombed. We were told we might amuse ourselves by turning over the rubbish heaps, and, for reward, pick up a few specimens of ore. No one would interfere with us, and we might wander at will in and about the ruins of square towers and count houses, which people fancy at first sight are baronial castles in ruins. They are ruins, right enough, and the money sunk in the engine shafts would have built castles and pyramids. These ruins look best at a distance, with big bundles of broom shivering and rotting in sunshine and storm. There is something weird and uncanny about the look of these ruins, with broom bundles like black things of misfortune hung about them. The Bookworm said that broom was a sign or symbol of bad luck. We didn't find fortunes in turning over stones on rubble heaps, and only secured a few tin and mundic and copper specimens of no value to the owner. Guy said they would look swagger when labelled "Tin found on Scapmore, Cornwall." The beginnings of a museum were in his pockets, he said, when they began to bulge out. There were some small houses scattered about, and every house was in a garden. None were empty, but, as all the mines around were idle, we began to wonder what the population lived on. There must be work somewhere, but a long way off, we thought. So far, indeed, that the men would tire morning and night when going and coming. The houses were low, 2-storied dwellings built of moor stone and roofed with thick turves kept in place by flat, heavy stones. The people we saw were mostly aged or women with young children. We came across an old fellow sitting on a big stone, blinking with watery eyes at an old ruined mine engine house. He made us welcome and offered us the whole of the stone he was sitting on, but we squatted on the turf and let the green lizards run over us. We said we liked it like that. Very soon we were interested in the old boy, who told us he was Jim Tregedgar, the son of Jim Tregedgar before him, and he cited Tregedgars sufficient to reach back to the days of the deluge. The house he lived in he built himself, out of core, and that is to say, in spare time, and he fenced in the bit of garden ditto. It was moorland, and no one said him nay, so he took what he wanted, and the rest did the same. All the houses were built like that, and every man his own landlord. All the mines around were working then, and at every shift hundreds of young men poured out of these stone hives and went to work underground or upon grass. And all the maidens rose early and went to work upon the dressing floors, singing like thrushes. The mine was the soul of the moor, and the pumps and stamps its music. The young men now are spread over South Africa and Australia, South America and the regions of Klondike. And the old people and young wives and children were left at home, dependent for daily bread upon the love of kindred whom they might never see again. Things were so different in the old days when Cousin Jack was full of money and spent it like a king, and then went to work again with a good heart, and always ready to kiss the maidens or wrestle and break a head on paydays. In fact, Cousin Jack wouldn't go home without a fight, unless he was poorly. This old man knew the names of all the mines round about, and their histories, when they cut rich and when they cut out and were shut down, and the broom hoisted to tell all the world that another bough had gone wrong. Every mine had its own particular spirit or family of spirits called nuggies. Every household was brought up in a firm faith in nuggies, and the good or bad fortune of a mine depended on the temper of the nuggies. Men working on tribute were very careful not to offend the spirits of the mine, and they had to be careful or they would earn little, and were sometimes lucky to reach grass alive. These spirits had underground workshops, wherein they worked upon silver anvils, and the walls sparkled with crystals of pure tin and virgin silver. These workshops were called parlours, and as they were not always willing to be disturbed, they misled the miners, making them believe that the tinkling upon the silver anvils was in the very opposite direction. Such was their power. Or they would cease working altogether, and then the men would become disheartened, and say the nuggies had forsook the bough, and she might as well be knacked at once, for all the profit she would yield. But the nuggies were good to poor tributers sometimes. After they had been working for weeks and months on starvation wages, months and months of work and no sound through the gloomy corridors but the tap, tap of the steel-edged tools and the fall of rock, barren and unprofitable. And then all at once the music on the silver anvils and the falling water indicating the presence of the precious load. If a man worked underground, he was bound to believe in nuggies, and if he did not believe and said so, then he was sure to be punished, for the nuggies had a way of leading men into trouble. A favourite way was to hide danger from a man until he was on the brink of it, and then, if stubborn and would not take warning, they'd let him fall over a precipice or down an old shaft and be heard of no more in the land of the living. What they gave freely and took no toll. They wanted none. All the minerals in the universe belonging to the nuggy family. Only they would have men civil, and civility brought rich rewards. The talk was rambling, and Guy put many questions. Had deponent ever seen a nuggy? Well, he believed he had. He was working on Wheel Rose, first corps by night, and he saw a flash at the end of the stope, and Jan Trebilcock slapped his hand over his deponent's mouth so that he shouldn't screech. That was a nuggy going into his parlour, and Jan Trebilcock followed the lead and came upon a load as rich as King Solomon's mines whilst it lasted. And he'd heard old men say, but Guy wouldn't have hearsay. Then deponent said he had heard the tinkling upon silver anvils, and beautiful it was, like the melody of church bells on a summer eve. The nuggies always took their anvils with them when they gave up possession of a workshop. They were wanted elsewhere. Provoking, said Guy. Whenever we get very near to something, it vanishes in this land of piskies and fairies and other enchantments. A little lizard crawling over Guy turned brilliant colours, which, the old miner observing, said there was a thunder planet passing, and wished us to come into his cottage. We had wandered 5 miles, but thought we could return before the storm burst, in which, however, we were mistaken, for we had hardly trotted a couple of miles when it burst with subtropical fury. Had it been night, the sight would have been splendid, but we had to dart for cover into a man's house. Like 3 drowned rats, there was no ceremony about our entrance, and none was wanted. An old man and woman were the only occupants, and they made us welcome, but our clothes stuck to us. We drank some hot tea and ate the remains of our pasties to the accompaniment of celestial artillery, which put to shame the Battle of Muckden. Still it poured, and the cottage trembled sometimes when the thunder was loudest. The 2 old people were quite tranquil, and the only apparent trouble they had in the world was our wet clothes. The little rivulets which ran from us were dried up, but might be traced on the stone floor, making zigzag courses towards the door. Then came the old man's hour for reading a psalm, and he opened the big book, without any apparent thought of strangers being present. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. No faff I shan't. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. There's that he do. They're precious dear." And so, until he finished and shut the book, "Now we will say a few words, for their dear Lord is with us." And without more to do, he went down upon his knees and spread out his hands, and his face shone. If there was a soul in happiness in the universe, it was this one. And he did not forget the strangers under his roof. "If 'em be out in the wilderness, Lord guide 'em like a good shepherd. And if 'em be cold, warm 'em in thy bosom, and turn 'em out to lie down in green pastures." The rain stopped suddenly, and the thunder grew more distant and the lightning less vivid, and when we were once more upon the downs a strange feeling crept over us. "I never thought I should have found myself kneeling in a miner's hut saying my prayers," said Guy. "This would just have suited Softy Smith, who's in orders now, going to be a bishop or something. At school, Softy was always longer at his devotions than the rest, and we used to shy things at him to remind him that the dormitory was waiting. Sometimes the boys made extra good shots at Softy and got him waxy, and one night he suddenly rose from his knees shouting, 'Amen, who shied that boot?' It was a shout, by Jove, and the captain on his rounds heard it, but we were little angels when he came to us, and Softy got a wigging for making a row. After that we dropped the Softy and renamed him Amen who shied that boot, which will sound splendidly when he's a bishop. 'My Lord Amen who shied that boot from Lower Egypt, then addressed the meeting.' Will look well in the papers. The name'll push him on in the world, and that he'll owe to us." The Bookworm wouldn't be drawn, and we walked, one on each side of him, until we reached the road, and then kept to it carefully to avoid tumbling down some old disused mine shaft. He gave our hands an extra grip before retiring, saying, "I shall never forget. I hope the little beggar isn't going to be ill." said Guy. "I don't like a fellow to talk solemnly and grip your hands and all that. And he's been wet to the skin." But no harm came of it. Chapter 25. A pick and shovel brigade, with or without hats, might do some good work on the north coast, where the sand has buried towns and churches. People speak of places having been drowned in sand, which they certainly were. The sands of hail, like those of great deserts, shift with storm and tempest, and have encroached from century to century. The sand hills are called towans at hail, and very weary walking we found it in places where coarse fibrous grasses have not covered the surface. What splendid results might follow the efforts of a pick and shovel brigade from Perran to Newquay. 2 churches are known to have been buried at Perranporth, and one at Gwithian near Hale. These have been discovered, so there is no mistake about them, and they are said to be the earliest Christian monuments visible in Britain. There isn't much to see now. There was an oratory at St. Gwithian, and the altar was built into a cowshed. Guy said it did not seem that people cared very much for antiquities until they were destroyed, or belonged to some other country like Egypt, for example. The fine dry sands here are splendid preservatives, and the Bookworm became enamored of his idea of a pick and shovel brigade undertaking scientific exploration. Why not? There were exploration societies in Italy and Greece. Why not in Cornwall, wherein there is a lost history and a lost language to recover? Guy was sure that lots of fellows would put in a few weeks digging and sifting and sorting if somebody would only take the matter in hand in a businesslike way. If legend can be believed, there is at Crantock a Cornish Pompeii waiting to be uncovered. The ancient Crantock was reputed to have been a large and important seaport with 7 churches, and the place was literally drowned in a deluge of sand brought upon the wings of the wind. The buried chronicles of Crantock, all in the Cornish language of course, would be a splendid discovery. The present church was allowed to fall into decay, but is one of the show churches in the north, and is now famous for the newspaper crusade against hapless women fingering their prayer books within its walls. The living is said to be worth 18 shillings per week. Fat livings do not abound. A house, a glebe, a pound a day does not fall to the lot of all parsons hereabout. The Bookworm remarked that his satanic majesty was not held responsible for sandstorms, although Hell's Mouth was on this coast. His majesty is familiarly known as Old Artful, and people speak of one another as artful by way of compliment. There is at present a good deal of confusion in the stories told about Old Artful and his doings in this part of the world. It is said that he never crossed the Tamar, and the question may only be answered satisfactorily when spirits are summoned from the vast deep and examined before a royal commission. The Bookworm took the matter in hand, with the following results in favour of Old Artful's presence. When the Phoenicians traded here for tin, Old Artful set up a smelting house and taught the tinners some tricks which they afterwards improved on. That St. Michael drove him away, and, out of pure spite, he cursed the blackberry, which is not now eaten after St. Michael's Day. That when visiting Cheese Ring, he saw an old woman making a conger pie, and inquired what she put inside. And the old woman, smelling brimstone, said, "If you don't take yourself off pretty quick, I'll clap you inside, and then we shall have a devilled pie," which threat so alarmed him that he gave a hop, skip, and jump, and landed at Devil's Point in the sister county. That old Artful had a turn for housekeeping, and was pretty much at home at the Lizard, and left behind as memorials his frying pan at Cadgwith and his bellows at Kynance. Then he had a post office, the earliest on record, and no end of devil's footsteps, ovens, and caves are to be found in the peninsula. That old Artful, finding himself lonely and amongst the out-of-works, built a stone fence about 7 miles in length, hence the couplet. One day the devil, having nothing to do, built a great hedge from Lerin to Low. And very good workmanship it was, for it is still there. In this way the problem of employing the unemployed was solved. That old Artful took a great interest in the building of churches, sometimes altering the architect's plans and sometimes choosing a site. Whenever a church is built in an inconvenient place, it is said that old Artful would have it there and nowhere else. And paintings on the walls often recorded the fact, showing him removing at night the courses which the masons laid down during the day. Many of these paintings were whitewashed by pious Covenanters, but little bits have been restored. It is said that St. Mewan wanted a high tower to his church, and there was a battle royal between him and old Artful, who prevailed. The cloven hoof may be seen on a stone gate post, a very short distance from the church. At Towednack, near St. Ives, old Artful would not allow pinnacles to be put to the church tower. That old Artful took a great interest in the building of churches, sometimes altering the architect's plans, and sometimes choosing a site. Whenever a church is built in an inconvenient place, it is said that old Artful would have it there and nowhere else, and paintings on the walls often recorded the fact, showing him removing at night the courses which the masons laid down during the day. Many of these paintings were whitewashed by pious Covenanters, but little bits have been restored. It is said that St. Mewan wanted a high tower to his church, and there was a battle royal between him and old Artful, who prevailed. The cloven hoof may be seen on a stone gatepost, a very short distance from the church. At Towednack, near St. Ives, old Artful would not allow pinnacles to be put to the church tower. That at Laddock, old Artful changed himself into a raven and made an inspection of the church tower, but the babies brought to be christened made such a row that he flew away. How can all these things have happened if old Artful never crossed the Tamar? Asked the Bookworm triumphantly. Sailors say that old Artful was never able to learn navigation properly, or find his sea legs on board ship, and there is an idea that he does not take kindly to blue water, and was never able to swim. It is well known that Lloyd's underwriters will not insure a ship with old Artful on board. He never interferes with the building of a ship, or does anything but provide a locker called Davy Jones's locker, where poor Jack rigs himself out before dancing with the mermaids on Fiddler's Green. Guy came to the conclusion that the Cornish climate was too restful for Sabbathless, restless Satan, who is never supposed elsewhere to be happy except in the wearing, tearing, raging whirligig of pleasure and vice. Hence the idea of his not crossing the Tamar. Chapter 26. Newquay is in Cornwall, without being Cornish, and is one of the few towns which has no saint belonging to it. Most of the towns in the peninsula date back to the days of saints and giants and then crystallize somehow. Newquay didn't grow that way, and was content to remain until quite recently the habitation of a score of fisher families who lived by beachcombing and pilchard seining. If the town of today were wiped out, there would remain the old fish cellars, a few weather-beaten cottages, and a hewer's hut on the headland. Newquay town is a modern creation and lies between Padstow and St Ives, which are rich in saints and antiquities and stand apart and distinct from everything modern, crystallizing around and about, but receiving little of the old life and tones. The original name of the place was Towan Blistra, which sounds genuine. The growth of Newquay is no miracle. People who went there for their health got better, and then the faculty said, "Try Newquay." Then the Great Western Railway took up the cry and shouted, "Try Newquay." And that's all the process. The sea and rocks and sands and caves are all genuine. The fine hotels are fine hotels, and fine hotels after their style are new in this part of the world. The houses have a hurried, built by contract look about them, and the whole place wants to be built over again and built differently. Most of the inhabitants now are Cornish in a transition state, so you don't know quite where you are. The hotel porter was regal. The man in charge of the lift was imported with the machine, and when asked, said he thought a Piskie was a new crank or something like that for working the lift. Newquay is like that now. You go there for the air, and you get it until every nerve is braced, and you get rid of the dismals and eat and drink and sleep until you find that the one pleasure of life is living. Simply that. Even Cornish people come to Newquay to be toned. The bookworm lost his restlessness at night entirely here, and no longer read strange books in his sleep. If you want to talk with a real Newquay man, you will find him on the headland, looking at the sea. We scraped acquaintance with one watching his nets dry on the grass. He told us he hadn't heard about Piskies lately. When he was a boy, and fish was cured in the old cellars, and the headland was the headland, and no mistake about it, and when a fisherman was a fisherman, and everything was as it ought to be, and had been from time back along, why, then there were Piskies, of course. Everything was different now, and he would not be surprised if Piskies were never heard of any more. Guy said gently that that might be a good thing, but the man ironed out all intelligence from his face and said nothing. He did not wish to have old memories stirred just then. The old men wandering about the headland always looked seaward when talked to, as though they were sure of the sea, and the rocks, and the beaches. All else round and about was slipping from them. New houses, new streets, crowds of people in strange garments, and such faces worn and wished. Why did they pitch upon this place? Guy said these old grumblers were very ungrateful. A fine town had sprung up, money poured into the place, and nothing was taken from it, and the old boys were not thankful. The bookworm took the side of the native and said no one liked the place which he called his own and had grown to love, to be transformed by strange hands so suddenly. What did the ancient Briton think of the Roman villa with tessellated floors and hot and cold baths and clothes mended on the while you wait system? Much better, no doubt, than British huts and blue paint, but not to the native taste. A diet of chublets and oysters disagreed at first with a stomach used to whelks and ginger beer. Variety is one of the attractions of the county. For a tourist who rides a bike or a motor, the variety is perpetual, and he must pull up even now and again and ask himself what has become of the last sensation. If you can rely upon your legs, you had best walk from village to village until you are where you wish to be. To lose oneself is an advantage sometimes, and you can't go very far wrong. When at Newquay, breathing in the Atlantic on the north, you are only 20 miles from your friends breathing in the soft airs of the sunny south. The tramp across the country from north to south is simply delicious. First of all, there are the moors, springy to the foot, restful to the eye, and the combes running seawards and catching sunbeams, so that you get opposing lines of light and shadow and charm everywhere. We made our way from Newquay to Roach, one of the portals to the land of the white men, a wonderful land producing the white clay which is shipped to all quarters of the globe. The Chinese have found it out and buy it in lumps. At first they used to buy it by the yard in their calico. The Lancashire merchant bought the white clay and worked it into his inferior cotton goods, and John Chinaman paid extra for the loaded yarn. They learnt the secret in the course of time, imported the clay, loaded their own yarn, and put the profit into their own pocket. All the white patches in the hills and valleys visible from here spell kaolin or china clay, and everything that china clay touches is white. White wagons piled up with square white blocks travel along white dusty roads drawn by white powdered horses, driven by men as white as ghosts in the last stages of galloping consumption. Fish, tin and copper was the old commercial toast. But china clay has come in and taken a front seat. It is only 150 years ago since a long-nosed Quaker found out that the stuff was good for pottery, and then chemists came in and found there was money in it for manufacturers of cotton and paper. And now the society beauty may have the satisfaction of knowing that her fair cheek is made fairer still by honest china clay, most delicately perfumed. The men and women who handle the clay get the same stuff for nothing, and do well enough without the perfume. China clay, being a modern industry in this land of ancients, has no piskie, or nuggy, or booker connected with it, and Guy took kindly to it on that account, saying it represented the practical, hard-headed 20th century. Who would buy Cornwall for its legends, he would like to know, whereas all the world was buying mountains of china clay. He supposed if this long-nosed old Quaker had lived 1,000 or 2 years ago, he would have been turned into a piskie, and a fine crop of legends would have sprung up. We failed to trace any legend or folklore about china clay. It was all modern. Modern discovery, modern uses, modern shipments. The only thing fabulous seemed to be the inexhaustible supply and the value of certain spots free from impurities. One might almost fancy legend at work. The wicked giant and the sainted virgin crumbling into kaolin rather than be the heroine of the romance, with wedding bell accompaniment. We came to a rock where there is a well which is said to ebb and flow with the tide, only it doesn't. The water is said to be brackish, which it probably is, but a reverend canon writing on the spot warned visitors against tasting it on that account. All brackish water does not come from the sea. However, this was a holy well once on a time, and young people even now drop bent pins into it and wish. It is very simple and costs nothing. Then there is the cell in which St. Roach lived until he died, and then the apartment, being light and airy and 680 feet above the sea, was occupied by successive saints. At present, the apartment is unoccupied, but the parish is taking care of it. This is the cell wherein the damned soul of Tregeagle tried to find sanctuary when pursued by the fiends from Dosmery Pool. The inhabitants of the wild and desolate region between Roach and Dosmery hear the hellhounds pursuing the shrieking soul on dark, tempestuous nights. And on Christmas Eve the hunt is said to be on a grand scale. The inhabitants of the moors keep indoors after dark. The story is told in A Ballad of the Haunted Moor. When the snow lay on the moor, brown moor, and frost hung crystals on bracken and tree, Gehenna and Sheol and Blackman's whelp shook themselves free with deep-mouthed bay to hunt a poor soul in pain. A soul in pain, a notable soul, the soul of Tregeagle, a deathless soul, burning in winter in Dosmary Pool, freezing in summer in Dosmary Pool, the soul of Tregeagle in pain. The black hunter's horn rang clear, and the pack gave music, yap, yap, yap. Gehenna and Sheol led straight to the pool, followed hot-foot by Blackman's whelp. The wonderful pack runs strong in the night to hunt a poor soul in pain. A soul in pain, a notable soul, the soul of Tregeagle, a deathless soul, flies from the pool with a shriek, a shriek. In terror there flies with a shriek the soul of Tregeagle in pain. The black hunter's horn rings clear, and the hungry pack, the hellish pack, Gehenna and Sheol and Blackman's whelp, sent the poor soul now from the pool, free from the pool on the snow-clad moor, free to escape its terrible doom. Tally-ho! A soul in pain, the dark soul of Tregeagle in pain, flies in black night across the moor, the desolate moor in snow and ice, the soul of Tregeagle in pain. Runs the hunter's horse with hoofs on fire, the terrible howling pack breathe fire, and yap, yap, yap along the white track. Follow the poor soul in pain, race the poor soul in terror and pain. Gehenna still leading the pack. To a light, the hunted soul, the soul of Tregeagle in pain, flies to a light on a rock, flies to a light on Roach Rock, the soul of Tregeagle in pain. The scent, the fiendish scent lies well on snow-white moor and frosted fern. The keen wind blows it back to the pack, the black hunter's pack with eyes of fire. Gehenna and Sheol and Blackman's whelp, yap, 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 hunting a soul in pain, mile upon mile over cairn and crag, over perilous ways in combe and hill, in sight of dead spectres abroad tonight, flies the scared soul in pitiless pain, the soul of Tregeagle in pain. A holy saint, a saint prays there. He hears the cry of a soul in pain. He knows the bark of the hellish pack, Gehenna and Sheol and Blackman's whelp, hunting a soul in pain, hunting a soul in deathless pain. The window is shut, no room. Gehenna and Sheol and Blackman's whelp breathe liquid fire with nostrils wide. The saint prays lusty for himself, not for Tregeagle in pain. Back o'er the moor, the frozen moor, flies the cursed soul to Dosmary Pool, with gleaming fangs and eyes of flame. The pack, the hellish pack, race by his side, yap, 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 race by the side of the soul in pain, back to the pool, the frozen pool, the burning soul, the notable soul, flies to its prison of tears, hot tears, flies to its cursed prison of tears, the soul of Tregeagle in pain. And the pack, the loathsome hellish pack, Gehenna and Sheol and Blackman's whelp, were balked of their prey this time, but still they wait on the lonesome moor to hunt the poor soul in pain, the soul of Tregeagle in pain. There is a lot of moorland about here, and a Cornish moor with its poor soil and wind-swept bracken, turning brown and golden before its time, its gallant heaths struggling amongst the rocks, or blooming grandly in sheltered patches, tells its tale of hardship, There is not much to be seen generally, but rough ponies running wild, and rabbits and wild birds innumerable. A moor is not much of a place for a lonely man with sad indigestion bad upon him. This was our first real experience of a Cornish moor, and we walked along gaily enough for a time, but conversation languished, for each was impressed in his own way by the immense void upon the earth. Whichever way we looked, there was nothing beyond speaking of limit to rolling moorland. The hills were only gaunt sentinels to a greater silence. To come from a city with millions treading on the heels of millions, and people in despair of getting breathing room, and then to find one's self upon a moor, is to experience a new sensation. Guy suddenly sent up a shout, sprinted 100 yards and back again, and then wanted the Bookworm to tuck in his tuppenny. The loneliness had got upon his nerves, but he felt better after this performance. The story of Tregeagle, hunted by hellhounds, had its origin in a locality more desolate than this, and the Bookworm said he was convinced that locality had much to do with the making and colouring of myths. Chapter 27. The capital of Clayland is St. Austell, but as usual, nobody is very sure about the saint. If you say St. Austell through the nose, you may be taken for a native. The church is in the centre of the town, and the narrow, crooked thoroughfares radiate from there. The town seems to have grown as wanted, every house pushing its neighbour towards the centre. The wealth of Ophir in black, glinting tin is said to underlie the town, and there is no doubt about the tin being there, for the nuggies may be heard working on their silver anvils, and bright lights dance upon the surface during autumnal mists, and any tinner will tell you the meaning of these mysterious illuminations. But the mines are not worked now, because the hills above and around are composed of the white clay which all the world wants. St. Austell is a Friday town. Most things are reckoned as from Friday to Friday, which is market day, and the inhabitants put on their Friday faces and Friday clothes. When it isn't Friday, the inhabitants delight in watching the clay wagons pass their shops, or in dodging them in the narrow, crooked labyrinths called streets. Everything gives way to the clay teams. Butcher boys, motor drivers screw themselves into nothingness, or back down side streets when the clay man is in view, driving his horses in single file, all straining at their chains. An endless procession of heavy wagons rumbles through the narrow streets with clay like loaded yarn, crack their long whips and keep their teams at it. These drivers, born upon the hills, look a race to themselves, straight-backed, upright and hard as nails. The clay which they absorb year by year doesn't hurt them. The amount which they swallow with their pasties must be fatal to microbes, as they seldom think of dying, until, tired of throwing about barrels of clay which would break an ordinary labourer's heart to handle. The old county is sent away in ships, as fast as they can carry it, but there is some left. Guy fancied that there was not so much expression in the faces and dramatic action with the people we met here, as in other places, and hazarded a guess that this was a result of looking at so much expressionless clay. There is not much in clay to lay hold of the imagination, except its whiteness, and the purer, the blanker it is. But then smirches in clay would cause a sensation like the entrance of a lady with a past into a party of sweet young things playing at goodness in a social comedy. There is little in the article suggestive of anything but money. The people here are said to be very rich in comparison with those in other towns. and they need 3 banks to take care of their cash. The chief amusement at night is to walk around the banks just to see that the doors are closed. The Bookworm made a few inquiries about libraries and art galleries and that sort of thing, but there were none. He felt sad. He couldn't help it, he said, when he found people with money without books and pictures and things of that sort. Samuel Drew was born here. So also was John William Colenso, the man who made an epoch in criticism by his straightforwardness. And there is plenty of room for a statue to each. The old bull ring is in evidence. The hill on which the town stands stretches away a mile or so, and the further you go, the better the view of the white glistening patches and the rills of white water trickling down the valleys seawards. Milk is the one idea. Milk flowing through the land, milk enough and to spare for all the condensed milk factories in the world. It's only an illusion. It's clay in solution, which by and by will show itself in the sea, like a white apron upon the shore, until it loses itself in the eternal blue. We stand here on what is a sort of terminus of the hilly backbone of the country. Eastward, it is black and rugged, moor and mountain, with white scars and ruined engine houses of abandoned mines. Then westward, and there is a paradise in green stretching towards the cathedral city. Down again to Cleopolis and the throb of arterial life. Clay and money, money and clay. China clay has no fairy of its own, like tin. It came upon the scene too late. And fairies can't be made at will, but must grow of themselves and take time. Fishing, agriculture, and mining have their tuteless spirits, able to work and dematerialize at will, and every desolate cave and cairn and moor and pool has its gnome and fairy, but when we come across anything modern, there is one thing wanting. Lightning comes from fairyland until it is put in lamps and sold per metre. China clay, unknown to the fairies and unblessed by the saints, has to make its own way in the world on merits, like any modern youngster turned out of a board school. And it does very well. This is one of the few towns in which a theatrical company can pay expenses. The people are musical and dramatic. They can't help it. And though a theatre would be taboo, a drama in public rooms is all right. Sports do very well, and you may race anything from lame ducks to donkeys, bikes and motors, men, women and children, but not horses. A horse race is, well, not to be mentioned. The game of hurling, peculiar to the county, is not played here now, though it is kept up at St. Columb and Helston and other places, and we saw it played at Newquay in a very mild sort of way. The origin of the game is prehistoric. When a Paleolithic gentleman had a nice bone, which another Paleolithic gentleman tried to grab, a tussle commenced and the best man got the bone and kept it. The evolution of the game out of a scrimmage for a bone is so natural that the best informed antiquarians have missed it. A hurler should be able to run like a hare, hide like a rabbit, leap like a kangaroo, and climb like a monkey. Then he should be able to box like a pugilist, wrestle like a champion, and sky a ball like an all-England cricketer. These are essentials. Then, if he escapes drowning and comes alive out of a scrum, he may make a good hurler. It is a fair game and may be played by selected teams, like football or town against country, with an unlimited number. A silver ball is the trophy. The ball is thrown into the air, the man catching it runs for his goal, and when the game is too hot for him, he skies the ball, and another fellow starts with the whole pack after him, until he's tripped up and buried under a living heap of players. Then someone steals away with the ball, wrestles with the first man who catches him, and then there's another scrum which gives points to rugby, and so on. backwards and forwards, from goal to goal until time is called, or someone insured against broken bones and sudden death manages to touch his goal with the ball in his hand. Carew says the game was played in his days so that players returned home with bloody pates, broken bones and out of joint, and such bruises as served to shorten their days, and all in good play, and never attorney nor coroner troubled for the matter. If this was the legitimate play, what could the other have been? The game, as played on Newquay sands, was quite another affair, and if revived with Newquay rules, might extend from Cornwall to the country. Porpoises play a game in the sea, something like hurling, only instead of a ball they throw a live conger into the air, and the one who catches dodges about until made to throw it up again, and so on, until time is called. An exciting game is on record, but the sensations of the conger are unknown. A good fish story usually leaves a trifle to the imagination. Chapter 28. The south coast differs from the north. Lord Beaconsfield came to Falmouth in his dandy days and wrote, "It is one of the most charming places I ever saw. I mean the scenery and the round. The scenery is still there, and the town is turning it to account and learning to live on it. Falmouth is very much like the lady who has seen better days and is reduced to put up the sign, 'Lodgings to let.' There was a time when the ships of the King's Navy and the mail packets came here, and the riches of the world were landed on its quays. Disraeli came here en route for the East when Falmouth was queen in her own right, if wealth and commerce and beauty can make a queen. Then things changed, and ships and commerce found other ports. But the beauty is there, and is all its own. Some people say more might be made of it in a commercial sense. There is a literary and refined air about the place which delighted the Bookworm, who found out the libraries and art galleries, polytechnic and observatory. Honest John Burton was the Bookworm's delight, and after picking up a first edition of Chatterton in the twopenny box, there was no keeping him away from the premises. It was a rare pick-up, and honest John wouldn't take more than 2d. Not he. We rambled over the premises and found heathen gods enough stocked away to fill a temple in Tibet. The Bookworm said there was nothing so rich and rare in the whole collection as old Burton himself, a dose of whom would banish melancholy. We took his word, for more good things were pumped into him than he could afterwards remember. Falmouth is linked in parliamentary matrimony with Penryn, an ancient borough so ashamed of its age that it sold its parish stocks and other antiquities for a song. The boroughs are an ill-assorted pair, and the political marriage was not made in heaven. Falmouth has its scenery and climate, two inalienable possessions, costing nothing, yet sources of unsuspected wealth if only made the most of. We came across the track of the American citizen John B. Bellamy, whom we met at Penzance. He left his card with honest John Burton with an order to send him along any available relics of the late King Arthur. He may get home, who knows? He left behind him also the opinion that if the derned old place was only on the other side of the Atlantic, the harbour might be filled up with the gold that would flow into it every season. Tired Yanks would find paradise and pay accordingly. The Garden of Acclimatation speaks of the climate in the bloom and perfume and variety of plants, all of which speak the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. There is no place in the county so well catered for in the matter of water excursions. The river Fowl is marked as one of the beauty spots of the county, and some compare it favourably even with the Dart and the Wye. It may lose or gain by comparison, but it is good enough on its own. The best way to see the Fowl is to sail from the open into the fjord-like inlet of Falmouth, and then up the valley, sinuous and well-wooded, narrowing as you go and increasing its natural beauty every mile. The Helford River should be seen in a similar way. Come in from the open with the sea and fancy, if you can, the mighty rush of waters boring its way through rocks, carving out the miniature creeks right and left until its earth hunger is spent. The scenery from Helford to Gweek is bolder than that of the Fowl, and some prefer it on that account. There is a lot of fishing done in the creeks, and most of the yachts we passed had nets and lines hanging over the bows or lying about the decks. The oysters have a good reputation, but there is no considerable trade done in pearls. Rivers are scarce, though the clouds are generous. Some say there are no real rivers, and that Cornwall has only the predominant partner interest in the Tamar and two brooks, Camel and Foy, which you can leap over anywhere with a long pole until you come to salt water. The Fowl and Helford are really estuaries. The upper moorland reaches of the Camel and Foy abound in delicious little spots where one can sit and listen dreamily to the stream fretting amongst boulders and swirling in sunshine and shadow amongst ferns and wild flowering shrubs, with effects incomparably beautiful. The Lizard end of the peninsula is a sort of receiving house for the news of the world. The secrets of many lands arrive here first, breathless and palpitating after their long runs on the ocean cables. Marconi has his stations here, and at unlooked-for places we come across notices reminding all whom it concerns not to foul the cables. There are secrets of which we know nothing, secrets of peace and war, ruin and success, love and hate, which we would give our ears to have an inkling of, vibrating under water and in the air. The peninsula has always been a sort of receiving office for the nation. At first, when foes came sailing along, the Cornishmen spied them and sent up a flare, and then the beacon fires flashed out the news in the dark night, so that all men might read in letters of flame. A fire lit high on St. Michael's Mount travelled with speed around the coasts of Britain. Hensbarrow, called the archbeacon of the county, could tell its story in fire from the Lizard to the Tamar, and set men's blood tingling and hearts throbbing as no wire or cable or printed word can do. It was wireless, and the British admiral, keeping watch upon the French fleet at Brest, informed my lords of the Admiralty of their movements by means of signals from frigate to frigate stationed across the Channel, and received at the Dodman by the sleepless watcher. Then the news travelled by semaphore from headland to headland, from Dodman to the Blackhead, to the Gribben, to Polruan, to Polperro, to Maker Heights, to the Commander-in-Chief. Very little time was lost, even in the old days, when there was anything to tell, and Cornwall was the eye and ear and tongue. The Dodman, the highest headland in the county, is one of those places of solitude, where depression will not stay. Hour after hour one may pass upon the bluff headland without seeing a human soul or hearing a human voice, and yet feel one's spirits elated in the silence. With a mere half-turn of the head one can see the whole Cornish coast from the Lizard to the Rame and beyond, and all the ocean traffic passing up and down. Then below, a sheer fall of 400 feet, are the little crabbing boats, mere specks upon the blue, shoaling into green and breaking into foam upon the dark, weathered rocks. And then the wind, blow which way it will, must sweep this headland, bringing with it the scents of heather and wildflower untainted, as though in all the world there were no such things as smoke and factories and areas of pollution. For miles the cliffs are covered with tall bracken, green in summer but quickly touched with brown and gold. These cliffs teem with life which we cannot see but know to be there. But feathered life is abundant and everywhere, in evidence, flying in air, clustering on the rocks, or diving and swimming when fish abound. And then there come up from the shore the rhythmic sounds of spent energy. Hush me to sleep with the soft wave song. Wash all the cares away, wash all the strife away, all the old pains that to living belong. Every sense is filled with thrills, and depression is impossible. People say the country is one vast sanatorium, and I think that open-air treatment on the Dodman would be delightful. The faculty are welcome to the hint. The headland is occupied only by a small shelter for the coastguardsmen and a modern granite cross which can be seen, soon after passing the Lizard, by persons on board ship. To those who think it, this fine monument is the symbol of the new life rampant over a buried past, for it stands on the legendary playground of the giants, who laid waste the whole district, and heaped the bones of their victims pile upon pile, until the headland rose majestic. A giant once dwelt here, who willed his quoits to his relatives, who, however, never claimed them. So they became part and parcel of the lord's inheritance, and may be seen to this day. Then footsteps of the Vikings are plainly visible in stone encampments, telling of another age, still violent, but of daring do. And to the west we touch Arthurian romance once more, for Geraint of the Round Table lies there, interred with Christian rites in a boat of gold, which was rowed across the sea with silver oars. All this and more within sight and sound of the Dodman Cross, bearing the following inscription: "In the firm hope of the second coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and for the encouragement of those who strive to serve him. This cross is erected A.D. 1896. The old order and the new rest peacefully on this headland solitude. The finest beaches on the south are here, right and left of the Dodman, and are seldom visited save by stragglers like ourselves, or picnic parties from a distance. The Bookworm chanced upon the fact that Cornwall had some little share in the production of Lord Byron, his grandmother being a Trevanion of Caerhayes, only a short distance from here. Admiral Byron, the grandfather, was known to contemporaries as Foul-weather Jack. So storm-pursued was he, and the poet's passionate love of the sea was not a mere sport, after all.